So today I'm going to be talking about the state of AppSec in New Zealand, which is a lovely labor of love pet project that my team started a few months ago and will finish eventually. First, just a little bit about me. I've been around tech for a while, 30-something years. I started out doing simulations and systems analysis. I spent some time as a university lecturer. I actually enjoyed that, but the pay really sucks. I was doing my doctorate in applied maths, computer simulation, and I ended up getting into J2E development because it paid so much better. And I eventually became an architect, and then in 2014, I jumped lanes and I started doing AppSec full-time. So I've run application security teams in the US, a couple here. I've been on AppSec teams, whoever had a paycheck for me, basically. I moved here at the end of 2017, and I am now at Datacom. My day job is that I am the manager of the application security services team. We primarily serve customers in New Zealand, but we're also doing some work in Australia as well. We have one team member in Brisbane now. We're focused mostly on external consulting. So I happen to be a SAM evangelist, so we do SAM-based maturity assessments and maturity improvement road mapping. Then, of course, we're happy to help, if you pay us, with implementation. And my particular areas, I help with, governance, risk, and compliance, policy frameworks. I do all of our training. We have a lovely suite of 9 security AppSec classes, which I'd be happy to present anywhere if you pay us. We help with tooling. We resell a lot of tools, and we have some DevSecOps specialization. And I should also, this isn't the most recent version of the slide, just like Tony, because we are now actually focusing fairly heavily on application pen testing, which is Kevin's deal, wherever he is. So internally within AppSec, we have this role of being a virtual security champion. So rather than trying to get a developer to take on the role as an other duty, we get the team to bring one of us on as a partial FTE, and then we take care of facilitating threat modeling and keeping the threat models up to date and so on. So we do that internally as part of our delivery of software. And then there's my other job. Now, a few folks have taken to calling me Mr. OWASP. And I say, well, that's Doctor, thank you very much, because I did earn that stupid degree. So I'm Dr. OWASP. I am one of the leaders of the OWASP chapter. I run the Auckland meetup. I also, when we do have training days, it's because I had a free weekend and decided to hold one. And thanks to Kirk Jackson in Wellington, one of the other leaders, we started up the the student focus conference, security.ac.nz. We had one in August of 2019. It went to sleep for COVID. And then we had a one day in September that we did in Auckland. Now, big thanks to the former co-chairs for handing me the chairmanship of the OWASP New Zealand conference. Thanks, Nick. So I took over chairing the conference in 2019. And so mark your calendars now. We have the dates. We have the venue booked. So the first full week in July, we'll be back at AUT City Campus. Thursday and Friday, 2-day conference. Tuesday and Wednesday, 2 days of training. I also happen to be on the Education and Training Committee. I am on the core team and one of the co-authors of the OWASP Software Assurance Maturity Model. And, well, I'll talk about the project that I just founded at the end of the talk. So I'm going to talk about the State of AppSec survey, starting with why we did it. And eventually I'll get to the OWASP project. That is supposed to be project. Excellent typography work on my part. So why are we doing this? One of the things you may have noticed is that there are lots of big companies who publish these really great state of blah white papers. However, if you look at the paper, it's really the state of that thing in the US, maybe Western Europe. And it doesn't really take into account the way things are done in some of the smaller markets. And in case you hadn't noticed, New Zealand is its own very special, smaller market. So part of our motivation was to be able to talk to actual data about how things really are going in New Zealand, rather than just saying, oh, it must be like the US, right? Even though we know it's not. And of course, consulting is my day job. So having some real data to be able to say, there is a real lack here. There are things we should be doing and aren't. But also to be able to say the opposite. There are things that we are doing really well, trying to be able to look at the positive trends. In order to do any of this, we need the direct data. Now, the project in this case was launched as an OWASP New Zealand initiative. But the efforts this year were basically that my employer said, yeah, sure, go ahead, you guys do that. So they gave us the permission to do some non-chargeable time to work on it. They gave us use of some licenses and computing resources and said, go for it. So the effort was performed by a team at Datacom, but it is an OWASP initiative. Now, we produced the survey in an agile fashion, meaning we were trying to get to an MVP, do it quickly, and we did it iteratively. So we put together a survey and we got it out and we got some data. And we'll talk about that more. So to acknowledge the team, it was basically 7 of the members of my team at Datacom who put this together, including Kevin and JP Sicking, our former boss, who is now doing something at one of the banks. Our intended deliverables, a publicly available white paper, and actually following the pattern that CERT NZ has been doing for their quarterly report in 2 volumes. So an executive summary with lots of pretty graphics and nice sound bites to take to your leadership, and a second volume with all of the actual data in it. The intent is that the report itself will be fully anonymous. So we're not going to name any organizations or respondents. It is just 54% of the responding organizations said this. However, we did offer on request that you could get a customized version of all the report as a "you are here" dot in it. It says your response was this. And we had like 2 takers. So out of the 50 odd organizations who provided responses, 2 asked for that. Now the survey designed by whiteboard, gotta love it. So could you read all that back to me, please? This is a Miro board. And what this was intended to do was, we're trying to figure out, well, based on the answer to one of the preliminary questions, what set of questions is it then appropriate to ask? Because basically, if you've got a shop that doesn't do any in-house development, you don't ask about their secure coding practices. Why would you? So that's what's showing here, is that we ended up with 4 options for this one question that then leads to a series of question pages that are presented. So that's our page flow. Why so complicated? Well, there are a lot of different ways to do application security, and it really depends on the kind of shop you are. So for many who would be responding, there'd be a whole bunch of questions that are completely irrelevant. Like I said, you do not ask a non-development shop how they do secure coding. So we ended up keying on 4 tiers of development. Either you don't do any bespoke software at all, so you're just using SaaS products and off-the-shelf software. You outsource everything, but you do have custom code. You outsource the dev, but you manage the deployment and operations yourself. Or you do everything in-house. And I know that that's still not covering all the nuances, but of course, it's a multi-choice and we have a flow after this. So how many of these do you want us to do? So here were the survey pages, and what you could tell on that big screen was the colored bands basically are these. It is an OWASP effort, so we asked some questions about, what do you know about OWASP? What tools are you currently using? Is there anything you'd like to see? We wanted to get into supplier security, especially because we knew we wanted some of the respondents to be pure consumers. So what are you doing about vetting your vendors? Or are you just not bothering? What do you think they said? So here's an example flow. So if you say we use only off-the-shelf commercial software, then we ask about Do you have an application inventory, and how do you maintain it? What do you do about governance, risk, and compliance? Do you know about OWASP? Do you have any of those apps pen tested? Or do you require, one of the questions asked, do you require evidence of pen testing from the vendor? What are you doing around security of your stuff in the cloud? And then we had the skills in hiring and the organization's priority question, which everybody got asked. As soon as I posted, hey, the survey is available, I got, I think, 3 responses back in the InfoSec NZ Slack saying, why isn't this anonymous? Honestly, because we're lazy, I guess. If you really think about it. The point is, we wanted to report on organizations, not individual respondents. So we needed to be able to know if we were getting multiple responses from the same org. Also, we were using a lower paid tier of SurveyMonkey, which meant you couldn't go back and edit responses. If you decided you wanted to resubmit, it would be a duplicate submission for you. So basically we just said, well, tell us who you are, tell us what organization you work for. We're going to use it to sort out the responses and then never talk about it again. So that's basically what we did. And then, of course, if you say, I want the customized report, then we need to know who you are because you need to get it back. So for data collection, and this is one of the things that we recognized right off we could have done better, we did some promotion. I sent out emails on the OWASP New Zealand chapter list. We got on the New Zealand Slack workspaces. We all personally reached out to our various colleagues and folks at customers and said, hey, don't forget to respond. We promoted it at the OWASP New Zealand Day conference. And I did my best to get some tweets out. I'm really not a social media guy. So we ended up collecting data through the end of July, but it basically meant, I mean, it is a self-selection survey. You needed to know it was happening and choose to respond. So what we ended up with, we got 91 submitted responses. Well, then we had to do some data cleanup because we had people who just submitted fake responses, including while we were testing. If we said, okay, we're trying to run through a test, we couldn't delete the response. So it's still in the data set. And someone else actually did test user at test company. Well, yeah, we can't use that. And then one guy said some other things that I can't repeat in the who are you questions. So those got removed. If you didn't specify an organization, then we couldn't know if you were a duplicate or a subsequent response to the same org, so out you went. And then if you were the same person and org, then just the last one in wins. So I had, I think, 2 occasions of that where somebody came back and submitted again. So we just took their second submission. And then for those where we got multiple responses from the same org, we reconciled them. Of course, it was very interesting when you had 3 responses, or actually 4 responses, and two gave the top box answer and 2 gave the bottom box answer. I wonder what the truth is. Why, thank you, Anna. So we used a very mental heuristic. Oh, look, the CISO gave the top box answer. I guess that's probably more reliable. So in the final count, we had 74 usable individual responses representing 56 organizations. So for 45 of those, we had a single response, and for 11 orgs, we had between 2 and 4 responses. So the only question we're reporting on at the individual level is what are your responsibilities? And people could select more than one answer. And so here's what we saw. We've got developers, ops people, development and ops managers, and then some security representatives. And of course you can see we had a number of folks who did multiple responses because, well, that's just kind of how our lives work. We have multiple responsibilities. Now for that division question that took you down different paths, what did we get? We only got 11% who said they only use off-the-shelf software. Now this is one thing that right away, seeing that, I thought, we need to do better. There are tons of New Zealand organizations that are purely consumers of software and probably are not giving enough thought to AppSec. So I really want to see more of their responses in here in order to get a better picture of how they think about these things. You can see far and away, almost 3/4 were people who do in-house development. And of course, I can recognize that those are the people we talk to on a daily basis. Those are the people who were at the OWASP New Zealand Day conference. So what do you know? They're overrepresented. Now, penetration testing. What's your approach? Oh, we don't do it. Only 11%. That's pretty good. We do it only on an ad hoc basis. That wouldn't be great either. And you can see there's not too many of those. But well over half of those who responded said that we do penetration testing on a regular cadence. And really, that's good to hear. Again, that is for our limited set of data, but it's still a really good result to see. Now, what do you do with the pen tests? And thankfully, nobody said nothing. But about 1/3 of the respondents said, we don't do anything unless it's critical. Well, that's something. And then on this one, we had about 1/4 of the people who didn't respond. So the way the questionnaire was structured was, even though you've gone down that path, we know that you as a respondent might not really have insight into everything about your organization. So it was simply skip the question if you don't have a good handle on it. And that meant if you didn't know what your organization's pen test program was all about, then you would simply not answer the question. Do you have a cyber policy that specifically supports AppSec? Unfortunately, 3/4 didn't even respond. And of those who did respond, we had, 7/8 of them said it's an AppSec specific policy. And one person said, well, it's in our broader policies. So here, this is one where the fact that we got so few actual responses doesn't tell us a ton about the question itself, but it does tell us we need more responses. Do you have a vulnerability and patch management program? And it's really good to see 73% total saying they've got something, and very few people not responding. So again, this is one that I look at that and it's really heartening to see. And God, after the couple of years we've had, it would have made me really sad if the no number was higher. Yeah, who here, how would I like to put it? Is there anyone here who is not shell-shocked from Log4Shell? So after going through that, we actually got a lot of phone calls about software composition analysis tools. Would anyone be surprised? Never let a good incident go to waste. Do you maintain a risk register? 70%, yes, we've got something. Actually, almost 80% if you include we manage things in email. So that's pretty good. And then we asked this was kind of a loaded question. This was before the borders even really opened up. We're asking, is there a skill shortage? And one of the things I want to point out is that our marketing group took that 96 number and ran with it. Oh, that's great. And 96% of New Zealand organizations think there's a skill shortage. Well, it was 96% of those who answered the question on a small sample survey. So that's pretty authoritative. But hey, it was marketing. But it is still that we recognize there is a skill shortage. And we followed this up with a question about, well, what are you doing to fill in the gap? And I don't have a slide for this. And gave multiple options and said, well, we're recruiting overseas. We're involved in training. We have an internal internship program. And there are some really good responses on there about how they're trying to get the skills built. Now, publishing this thing. Initially, we made a promise that it was going to be out by the end of July. Yeah, okay. It has been a labor of love, and it has been a spare time effort for the folks involved. And I just spent the last 4 weeks on the road, so you know how much time I spent writing. but we're really going to do it, I swear. And in this case, it's one of those things that I don't want to go away for the holidays without having the paper out there. So you'll see something in the next couple of weeks. So we'll be publishing any day now. And the place where you will find it is on http owasp.org.nz. And don't worry, it's a redirect to that, which is a horrible URL structure, but that's what the OWASP Foundation decided on. So it'll basically be on our chapter homepage. As soon as it gets published, I will add the link to the PDF there, and you'll have access to it. It is going to be an OWASP document, so it'll carry an OWASP Foundation copyright, and it will be licensed under the share alike. So the key thing about that is, for those in the audience who are also security consultants, you're completely free to relabel this and call it your own white paper, as long as it's issued under the same license and you attribute the OWASP New Zealand project as the OWASP New Zealand chapter as the original source. So Defend and everybody else, get ready to go. And yes, Datacom will be doing the same thing. Some observations from this. Most of the questions were optional, many of them were only even offered for certain paths. Not everyone has enough information to answer every question. We knew that. So in order to get representative results across all the questions, we need lots of responses, not just 74 usable responses, but hundreds. So that means one of the biggest things we're going to need to do, bless you, is invest in improving awareness of the survey and getting responses in. Now, one of the other things that was pointed out very quickly in the Slack, and like, yeah, you're right, we'll do better next time, is that the question and response design was done by an AppSec team. We live by a certain agenda. There are things that we think are important. So our questions and the responses were focused on those things, even when we were trying not to have that kind of a bias. It still crept in. So that means we need to be better about making it a more universal survey that's going to ask questions that are meaningful across the whole spectrum of organizations. So in order to get more meaningful results, we need to debias our questions and the responses. Stuff to do for the future. Well, the first thing is I really want this to be the first annual survey. So looking at all of those improvements, looking at how we can get the word out and get more responses in 2023 survey, and make sure that we can get support. So there will be opportunities for sponsor support of the chapter project going forward, so that we can keep this going and we can get some professional assistance in doing some of these things. And then, of course, we want to be able to have trend metrics. But you don't have a trend unless you have at least 3 data points. So that means by 2024, we'll have at least 3 responses from some organizations, which will mean we can start to talk about trends. We can start talking probably after another year or two. So some opportunities for improvement, actually engage with some experts to make sure we produce a better questionnaire, be better about the data collection effort, much better about promotion and messaging, and making sure that we have those other security perspectives coming into our design. Now, the State of AppSec Survey Project. This is a global OWASP project, which I founded in July, and founding an OWASP project is dead simple. You need an idea, some deliverables, and a timeline. And they say, okay, here you go. Here's your GitHub repo. Now do something. In this case, what we intend to do is take the work that we've done in New Zealand, get it some nice OWASP branding using a graphic consultant that the foundation has, and turn it into some reusable templates and blueprints that other groups, like, say, the Melbourne chapter, can use to do the same thing. So it's in order to take what we've learned and what's been produced here and make it so that other organizations, mostly other OWASP chapters, but it is, of course, open source, can do the same thing. And 25 minutes. Questions?